Hi everyone, my name is Lwanele, your host and clinical psychologist, and welcome to Learn to Heal. This is amazing. I don't know what number of episodes this is, but I have pushed. I have tried to be consistent, and I am absolutely loving it. But before I even go into the content of today, I just want to say thank you. I honestly just want to say thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your responses. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for engaging. And thank you for taking this journey for yourself and learning how to heal. And honestly, you think sometimes that it's your family and your friends that will engage with your stuff because they love you, right? But I've honestly seen so many people I don't know, people that follow me, people that don't even follow me on any socials, and they say, listen, I love your podcast, I love the content, it's helped me think differently about the situation. And for me, that's like mission accomplished, right? When you start thinking differently about some of the things you have been doing that were not helpful for your self-development, that is mission accomplished for me. So thank you so much. Thank you for engaging, and thank you for the feedback, and thank you for sharing with people, because that's how I know, right, that at least I'm talking to someone, and that it's actually helping someone. It's when you give me feedback and you let me know, I loved this, I didn't like this so much. So thank you for that feedback. And honestly, thank you just for giving your time, just to give me some pointers and feedback and all of that. I think that's such a beautiful thing that you can do for me too. So I am on this journey of learning how to heal, and you are on this journey of learning how to heal, and hopefully lots and lots of other people are also going to join us and actually take care of themselves and grow in their sense of development, their sense of thinking, and also just be happy human beings. I think for me, that's the end goal. We learn to heal so that we can be happy human beings, and we can relate well with other people. We can relate well with ourselves. That for me is just amazing. All right, let me jump into what I wanted us to think through today. So today I wanted to talk about insecurities. Insecurities are a major thing in our lives, right? We all have them. We all have insecurities. We all have these things that cloud our judgment, that make us feel like we're not good enough. We have these things that are worries, that are concerns, that are doubts, that actually are obstacles to us doing what we want to do, getting to the places we want to get to. Ultimately, yes, I like doing things well, but ultimately it's an insecurity that made me start my podcast late and not when I actually wanted to do it, which was a year and a half ago. Sometimes if you go back and you think about the things that you've wanted to do, some of the excuses you give yourself literally are just insecurities. And it doesn't mean that they're not relevant, right? It doesn't mean that they're not important. It doesn't mean that they're not valid, but it means that you need to be aware of them so that you can do something about them, right? Because you don't want to spend your time actually feeding the insecurities while denying yourself of the things that you'd like to do. So it doesn't matter for me to say, okay, granted, I don't have all the equipment that I want. That's a valid reason, but it doesn't help me with the goal that I actually want to achieve of helping people learn how to heal if I actually decide to just not do anything. But before I get ahead of myself, let's start with what is an insecurity. So I like to think of insecurities as the things that actually are they're trying to penetrate themselves through a barrier that exists, right? So I spoke about boundaries, and boundaries are there to help us protect what people want to say to us, or the things that people want to either, the influences from other people directly into us and our influences to other people. So essentially you put boundaries so that you can protect yourself. However, with insecurities, the sense of safety the threat of safety isn't the other person. The threat of safety is yourself most of the time. People, what they do is that they amplify the insecurity. So for example, if you struggle with weight, right? And a person says to you, oh, hi, that dress makes you look a little bit fat, right? The person has amplified an insecurity that has already existed on the inside of you. However, if you don't think that you are, and a person says, oh, that dress makes you look fat, you're like, no, thank you, ma'am. That's not true. Or, no, it's because this thing is flapping. Or, do you get what I mean? So the insecurity only thrives if there's a seed on the inside of you that's already questioning yourself about that particular thing that a person is saying. So why is it called insecurity? It's insecurity because it's doubts, it's fears, it's concerns, it's all of these threats that exist that are actually threatening your sense of security within yourself and with the relationship you have with yourself. I'm hoping this is making sense. So essentially what it is that the way that you think about yourself, the way you think about your work, the way you think about your business, the way you think about your podcast, all of the things you think about, the things surrounding you, you are doubting that they are sufficient and that they actually meet those particular requirements. And what does that mean? That means you think there's a standard. And insecurity exists because you believe there's a standard and you are not meeting that standard. So you thinking of yourself as inadequate, you don't match up, you are not good enough, your body is not banging enough, or you are not fit enough, or your work is not on par with what you want it to be. Your music is not where you would like it to be. And when a person then, which is the person coming through the boundary, says anything with regards to the things that you already have an insecurity about, those things hurt and those things feel like, oh, there it is. I was right. My mind was right. There's a fulfilled kind of fact, because actually I've always known that I'm not as good as I think I am. So why do I even want to talk about these things? Because they're icky, they're awkward, they're uncomfortable, they trigger us. I want to talk about them because they affect you. Whether you like it or not, an insecurity affects your life. Whether you repress it or not, your insecurity is affecting your life. Whether you try put it in a box and hide it under the bed, right? Your insecurity is affecting the way that you live your life. If you're a person that's insecure about their body, you're not going to want to go to events. You're like, oh, I don't have the right outfit, right? That could be a valid excuse, but sometimes it's actually because you don't think the clothes that you have are actually suitable for the environment you want to go into, right? Or you can say, oh, actually, I don't want to go with my friends anymore because I feel like all of my friends are really small and I'm not as small as they are, or I'm too small and all my friends are kind of like thick and I really like to have that kind of body and I just feel like I'm not that kind of person, and that affects your social life. Or you think to yourself, oh, I'm actually not pretty enough, or actually my music is not good enough. I've seen that my piano can be done like this and I'm trying to do something different, but I actually don't know if people are going to listen to it. What's that doing? It's denying you of your dream. So we have to talk about these things because they're actually denying us of the places that we deep down desire to be. So number one strategy of thinking about insecurities is be aware of your insecurities, right? And the nice place, not nice, but like the easiest way to kind of think of, okay, maybe I don't think I'm insecure. So how would I find out what my insecurities are? The first place to think about is, where do you find yourself the most defensive, right? So And in defensiveness says you are continuously, a person says to you something very unrelated, or let's say, for example, they say, oh, your dress is not nice, right? And then you're thinking to yourself, oh no, but this dress is so expensive, and and you start like being defensive and over elaborate about something maybe a person didn't even say, or someone says, oh, where did you buy your dress? Okay, that's a better example. Where did you buy your dress? And you're like, oh no, this dress is so expensive, no, this dress is so nice. And the person wasn't even asking you about all of these things, but perhaps maybe you're feeling insecure about what your dress looks like. Maybe you were thinking to yourself, am I underdressed or am I overdressed? So that's number one place you can find out about, do I have an insecurity about something? Where are you most defensive? The things that you're constantly defensive about. The other way that you can think about or finding out where your insecurities lie is, what are you most obsessing constantly about? Is it the way that you look? Is it your work? Is the perfection of your work? Is your work a, kind of like an extension of your identity? Where are you obsessing about? And you kind of always thinking about those things, sometimes to an extent where it's not feeling very healthy. And then the other place that you can think is literally the opposite of the second one, right? Is, what are you constantly avoiding? Because sometimes, because we don't like being people who are insecure, because we have a connotation of insecurity as something that's terrible. We don't want it. We resemble it for people who are a particular way. That's not us. So you start repressing your feelings and you start avoiding what that actually looks like. So it's finding out the places where you are repressing the most, right? So these are the things that you would avoid. These are the places where you would, these are the things you don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about that. When the thought comes into your mind, these are the things that you shrug off. You don't want to engage in those kinds of conversations and those kinds of thoughts. So this is the other place where you can see, I think there's potentially an insecurity here. So that's how you can somewhat do an evaluation for yourself. The other way is probably asking the people that are close to you and that relate closely with you, and say, so if you had to say, what are my insecurities, what would those be? And you have to be ready for people's responses, right? So when you start asking people questions like that, you must be ready for them and not, again, be defensive in those moments. Take it in, take what you feel like would be necessary, is actually authentic and truthful. And then I guess the other things might be people's opinions. But I think those are some of the places where you can figure out where your insecurities lie and how they may be affecting you. But the other question that you may be asking, but like, Lwanele, where do these things come from in the first place? Like, why am I feeling like this? And I think the first place insecurity comes from, like I said earlier, or alluded earlier, is your sense of expectations. And those expectations stem from where you believe your standard lies, right? So let's say, for example, you are me, all right? And I'm evaluating my podcast. What does my podcast look like? Is it successful? Is it not successful? If I start looking at other people's podcasts who've been podcasting for 2 years and say, oh, my podcast is not good enough because of that, of course it's not on the same level as theirs. I literally started a couple of weeks ago. I am still figuring it out. I don't have all the right equipment. I am figuring it as I do it, but also I'm trying to be authentic in the way that I do it and not stress too much about what's not fitting and what's not there and what's working out the best and what's not working out the best, right? But if I take what other people have been doing for the past couple of years, even past couple of months, or even people who have the resources that I don't have and started at the same time, I'm doing myself a disservice, right? If I start looking at the numbers of, oh, okay, what does my audience size looks like? I'm doing myself a disservice. And if I take all of those standards and all of those expectations and I say, okay, actually, I'm going to stop doing this thing because clearly I'm not as good as this other person, right? That is then an insecurity that would be sitting with me that then affects what I can do with this. It affects the people that have, sent me messages and saying, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for this. It affects even my own goal, because my goal isn't what those people are doing. My goal is literally helping people learn how to heal. My goal is to engage in this process for myself. My goal is for people to start thinking differently about their growth, differently about their relationships with themselves. So my vision and my goal for this podcast needs to come through every time I start thinking about, I'm not doing as great as the other people. All right? And that's what you need to be doing as well. So when you find yourself comparing yourself to other people, you have to ask yourself, but what is my goal? What is my vision and what's theirs? Because why am I comparing myself with a person that may not necessarily have the same goal as me? But also at the same time, where did I start versus where they started? So here's the other thing about insecurities, which is the second place where insecurities come from. We do not appreciate our differences. We don't appreciate our starting points. So if you can travel with me to like a maths example, or stats example, anything, graph, right? A graph sits on, a normal simple graph sits on 0 in the middle, negative on your left, and positive on your right, right? That's what a graph at the very basis level looks like. On your horizontal line, you've got 0 in the middle, negative on the one side, and positive on the other side. I start my fitness journey. Let's talk about fitness journey. So gave birth a couple of months ago and I'm starting my fitness journey. And I say to myself, I've been exercising for the past 3 months, right? Why am I not seeing any differences? Firstly, I have to understand, okay, fine, I'm how old am I? 31-year-old. I just had a baby a couple of months ago. I'm this, I'm that, whatever situation kind of sits, right? And where do I start? Am I starting at a 0 point? Am I starting at a negative point? Am I starting at a positive point? I'd pretty say I'm starting at a negative point, right? Because I still firstly need to lose the baby weight. Never mind the fitness that I then need to then have and build muscle and all of that stuff. So I need to start, I'm starting at a negative. But if I compare myself to a friend of mine who firstly has been on a fitness journey for the past 2 years, then they're probably at this point, they're on a positive 3. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, but why am I not in my 3 months of working out having the same results as my friend who in their 3 months of working out has had so many positive results? Because we're not starting at the same point, right? So that's one example. The other example you can think about is when you measure your sense of success. So you're thinking to yourself, I went to varsity with these people, and one is a senior manager somewhere. The other one has bought a Ferrari. The other one has traveled the world, and I am here. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life, right? And here's the thing about, if we use our graph again, the person who bought a Ferrari, no black tax, nothing. They started working and they were able to obsess over their work and actually make sure that they are progressing in their careers. They left work at 7 o'clock. They arrived at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. No child, no family. Where are they starting? They might be starting at a positive 1, right? Because they actually don't need to feed a family. They may have responsibilities, yes, but probably, not so much as a person who has to play black tax. You think of yourself, I'm paying a black tax, and on top of paying for my parents' food, I'm paying for my sister's education. On top of that, I actually need to make sure that I am building at home, because we've been staying in a 2-bedroom house and there's like 12 of us. Do you get what I mean? Where are you starting? -5. Which means 2 years later, after working, you probably only then arriving at 0. And the people you started with that may have started at a 0 are probably, at a 3. So my point with that, I'm hoping you followed my very mathematical example. But the point with that is that we don't all start at the same place. And sometimes we move this in the same amount of steps. And you're like thinking, but I've moved 3 steps and you've moved 3 steps. Why does your 3 steps looks like it has more? Right? It's because you didn't start at the same place. And sometimes you've even moved further than they have, but you actually had to take yourself all the way from the negative to the positive, and only then you're able to buy your really small car, right? And they have their Ferraris because they didn't have to do all of the steps that you had to do before. So insecurities rob us. Not understanding where you start robs you, because now you're comparing yourself to other people that actually are not where you started. But if you start appreciating your individual points, your individual evidence, and your individual trajectory of your journey, then you're at a better place of being happy and actually appreciating the amount of work you have done throughout your journey. Right? So the one thing is standards, like I talked about. The other thing is comparing yourself or not, appreciating where you start. But there's many other things that affect, why we become insecure. The comments that people have about us, the environments that we live in. But those are all things that are external to you, and I don't want to focus on those things because we're working on ourselves. And I don't, you can tell people, please don't make such comments about me. But all the people that know the aunties back home, they know they're going to tell you, oh, you're so fat. Oh, you're so like this. Like, okay, please don't tell me such things because you're taking me back, or you're making me conscious of things that I actually wasn't even conscious about. So it doesn't help being obsessing over other people's comments or input about your insecurities. What matters is what can you personally do about those insecurities. The other thing that I think is so important for us to reflect on when you're talking about insecurities is our sense of validation, right? What makes us have, we talk about this thing of low self-esteem, high self-esteem, low confidence, high confidence. What makes us actually have a high sense of self, a low sense of self? It is your sense of validation. There are people that grow up in environments that are constantly validating them. Oh, you're so smart. Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, your music is so great. And all of those kinds of things. And we see them on Idols all the time, right? It's like, I think your family should have told you that maybe the music is not there yet, right? But maybe it's because your family doesn't even recognize it. So sometimes our insecurities come from a place where we are not being validated enough, or we are not validating ourselves enough, right? And we need to learn those skills of validation. How do we validate ourselves in a way that actually makes us see the evidence of the work that we've put in? How do we see and track the progress that we have? Let me give you a very simple example. I use this example all the time. I love running, right? And I didn't grow up an athlete. Actually, I grew up with this thing, called Ibonde. I don't know if you guys know it. Some people may. Like, I did not play sports. I was not athletic. That was not my vibe. I was an academic girl, and I knew that's my thing, right? But I picked up running in my adult life. The first couple of runs, when you have not ran, you're not an athletic person. Even if you were an athletic person and you kind of lost it, the first couple of runs, you are huffing and puffing for air. You can't breathe. You don't know how to run. You don't know how to land your foot. You don't know how to do any of these things. So let's say you run your first 3 kilometers in an hour, right? And then you run every day, you improve. And then you're like, a month later, why am I still huffing and puffing for air? 2 months later, I'm huffing and puffing for air, right? You can't track your progress if you can't understand your progress if you're not tracking it, right? So one of the things that helps runners is being able to track on their watches, on their phones, on whatever tracking thing that you've got. And what does that do for you? What that does for you is that it helps you understand, day one, I ran 3 kilometers in an hour, but week 2, I ran 3 kilometers in 45 minutes. The thing about it though is that at the end of the run, you are still huffing and puffing for air. Why? Because you've improved your pace and your distance has actually improved as well. The way that you run, your foot is landing better. So there are qualitative differences in the way that you've actually been running from week 1 to week 2. And then let's say week 3. You are still huffing and puffing for air. Month 4, you're still huffing and puffing for air. Why? Because now you actually run your 3 kilometers in 20 minutes, which means you're stretching your body further and further. So qualitative differences, again, the pace has improved, the distance may be higher, all of those things. So if you don't track your progress, what does that do? If you don't track your progress, that means you don't understand all the places you've actually improved, and all you see is the huffing and puffing for air at the end of the run. But when you think about it, it's like I'm huffing and puffing for air because actually I am running faster and faster every single day. Do you get what I mean? So if you don't validate yourself because you're tracking yourself, then you actually don't see your progress so that you can overcome those insecurities. But here's the other thing about validation. When you validate yourself by tracking yourself, you actually cause yourself to be audacious to do even more things, right? So when you seeing yourself, okay, I've ran my 3 kilometers, I'm now at 3 kilometers in 20 minutes, I'm going to try do 5 kilometers next week. I'm going to try do 10 kilometers next month. Because now you are audacious enough to increase your goals because you can see yourself improving day by day, right? If you are not tracking yourself and you're trying to avoid the insecurity of your body, or of not knowing how to run, or of not knowing how to land your foot properly, or huffing for air at the end of each run, if you are avoiding all of that and you're not tracking and you're not looking and you're not understanding what's happening behind the face value of what's going on, then you're actually robbing yourself of being audacious in pushing that goal further and further every single time. Is this all making sense? I hope so, because it's making sense to me. And I'm getting aha moments in, as I'm talking to myself right now. So it's important to track, it's important to validate. And the last thing I want to talk about, because there's many things, right? The last thing I want to talk about with regards to where it is coming from, or what actually exacerbates our insecurity, is actually this idea of perceived failure. And the reason why I'm saying it's perceived is because sometimes the failure that we experience is not real. It is perceived. We think we have failed, but actually we may not have failed. Firstly, failure is not a destination, not in my eyes. For me, failure is a process. It's a journey. You fail at one thing and you figure out how to do it better, and then you actually keep moving. You learn through the experience of failure, and then you actually keep it moving. Does that mean you don't mourn losing your 100,000, or mourn having gained 20 kgs, or mourn the fact that you can't produce very well, or mourn the fact that you don't have a nice fancy mic for your podcast? You do. You mourn all of that, but you also recognize that, oh, actually, this is not a failure. I am processing and I'm learning and I'm going through this journey. Now, going back to this idea of perceived failure, why am I calling it perceived? I'm calling it perceived because sometimes it exists only in our minds. So if I said to myself, or someone says to themselves, I want to release, and the reason I'm changing the myself is because I don't know how to sing, and my example is related to singing. So that's why if someone says to themselves that I want to release 10 songs, right? I'm gonna release 10 songs this year. And they end up releasing 8 songs this year, but like really good 8 songs, right? And they think to themselves, I failed to do what I said I was going to do, right? And you have to think about it. What was the reason for releasing the music in the first place? If my reason for releasing the music in the first place was so that I can have really nice songs that are out there, I can be known in the music industry, I can make some money for my family and for myself, I can actually change or revolutionize the music industry, does producing 8 versus 10 songs change that? Or is it because you had quantified what that would look like that even when it's staring at you in the face, you actually don't see it? Do you get what I mean? Sometimes it's perceived because we're so married to the idea of what it actually needs to look like. Here's another example. You pass your degree. You wanted to pass your degree with 4 distinctions, right? And you only get 3 distinctions. You think to yourself, I have failed and I'm not good enough. I'm not as smart as I think I am. And have you failed? You may not have met what getting your degree, what it looked like in your mind when you were thinking about it. Yes, you didn't meet that kind of goal, but you actually haven't failed. Because at the end of the day, you have passed your degree. You do have the job that you wanted, which is why you were doing the degree in the first place. Some things are enablers. Some things are not the destination. Getting the degree enables you to actually do the work that you want to do. Sometimes going to a training program enables you to get the job that you want to do. Sometimes releasing a song enables you to be known in the market to actually get to the record deal you want to do. Sometimes writing a book enables you to be known in the industry so you can be given the publishing deal that you actually want to have. We need to realize, was this the goal or was this the enabler? Because if we are putting the enabler as the goal, then we are probably always going to fail. Because the enabling or the journey of enabling us to that particular goal that we want is always going to look different. You are not always going to say the thing the way that you want to say it. Otherwise, you're going to be a robot. You're not always going to sing the way that you think you wanted to sing, right? Sometimes the enabling journey doesn't look like the way that we want it to look like. But think about the end goal. What was the end goal to begin with? It was to get the degree. It was to get the job. It was to get the record deal. It was to get the publishing deal. So how about you appreciate that instead and not perceive this enablement that didn't work accordingly as a failure? Right? So I hope in the way that I've structured how I've spoken about these insecurities, you are able to identify the insecurity, understand where it comes from, but also think about how to do it differently, which is why I didn't do 3 things of how to do this and 3 things of how to do strategy, because I think it's important to be able to link the cause of your insecurity with how you can think about it differently. All right. I hope this was an amazingly helpful episode for you. I already actually just want to start this camera and go start writing some notes for myself, because there are things that I've said even in this moment that have made me realize quite a lot of stuff, right? And I've gotten aha moments. Again, we are learning how to heal, and the learning process is a journey. We're not going to figure it out all in one go, and we're not going to deal with all of our insecurities in one podcast episode. So let's take this, let's digest it, let's reflect for ourselves. What are our insecurities? Have we identified them? And also, how are they blocking us from the places that we've been wanting to get to? And how do we move them out of the way so that we're able to authentically do the things that we want to be able to do, and not perceive even the journey as a failure, even if it's not a failure. And if you have failed, think about the lessons that you have, received in that process, and actually learn from that. Does that mean you don't mourn the failure? You absolutely do. You take your moment, you take your L, and you are actually you think about, okay, how do I do this differently? What have I received? But then you actually proceed from that, because failure is never the destination. It is always a journey to somewhere. It is a process to a place where you wanted to get to in the first place. So do not stop at the failure. Keep it moving. Take the time to grieve, take the time to process, but also just keep it moving. And let's deal with those insecurities, because they're actually not helping us. Thank you, everyone. I will see you on the next one.